Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
Can an issue change a marriage or ruin it altogether? Today's story with a similar plot. Enjoy it! I was finally going to be happy again. About time, damn it. My dear hubby John came home early from work today, early, like, for the first time ever. The jackass, whose job always came before me. I was just finishing up getting ready for my date tonight. Yes, an actual date with a real, sensitive man, not just a night out with my girlfriends like John thought. He walked into the house with an attitude, grabbed me by the arms, and screamed, "Who exactly are you seeing tonight, and where?" But I was tired of his bullying. I looked him right in the eye and told him off. "I'm seeing Jack Carter tonight for dinner and drinks. Jesus, I need some real intim for a change." That got him. He let me go and actually said, "My wife has lost her mind." That absurdity flew all over me. I was as mad as I could ever remember and started screaming right back at him. Then he said something like, "Charlie was right all along." That a-hole? That little wormy nothing a-hole? I called 911 on his worthless butt, and I also called Jack to come and protect me. Finally, a patrol car showed up, but so did two of his friends. Where the hell was Jack? That's who I wanted and needed right now. Then my mom and sister Janice also arrived, and John finally left. Finally. I cried and cried in their arms as they comforted me. Maybe my nightmare marriage was finally ending, and I had a chance for some happiness. But I still felt some deep, deep sadness watching John walk out that door, just residual feelings from the ever-deepening unhappiness I'd been feeling the last 6 months. A million thoughts were flowing through my mind. Jesus, what the hell is going on? I thought to myself. Brandon, my number 2 in any tactical situation that might arise, had quietly asked me to join him for a cup of coffee in our dingy break room. He looked glum, then said, "What the hell is going on with Jack?" Jack Carter was my oldest friend on the unit and basically my number 3, but he was working hard and wanted a shot at being a sergeant as soon as possible in the St. Louis County Tactical Operations Unit. Basically, he wanted my job, Sergeant John Thornton's, and I hoped he'd get it, after I moved up at least one notch myself. Jack Carter? What do you mean? He's talking a bunch of crap about you and Susan. Susie? My Susan? I asked incredulously. He's more than hinting he has a very personal relationship with her and that he's going to beat you up because you've been abusing her, basically your whole marriage. My mouth literally dropped open. I was so shocked and speechless. What the hell, was all I could think. Brandon continued, "About half the guys in the unit believe him. Me and a couple of others, who spent the most time with you and your family, don't. It's just not possible. But I'm afraid this kind of personal crap in the unit could end up dangerous. No, we all have guns, and one cop screwing around with another's wife and family, even if he wasn't actually screwing her, could cause some real problems in any kind of action we might all get involved in. Not to mention some Old West-style mano-a-mano shootout." Craziness was about all I could say. This had to be addressed. But should I talk to Jack or Susie first? Was Jack making a play for Susie, and she had totally rebuffed him, so he's acting out this kind of chicken male ego puffery? I'd known Jack a long time, since our army days, and he could be a bit of a dick sometimes, especially around women. But otherwise, he was stable enough. I never had any doubts about him having my back when the shit hit the fan. Christ, I'd spent a lot of time with him, drinking after his own wife dumped him because of the combination of job stresses, his necessary work absences away from home, and because he had a slight problem resisting all the temptations fit men in uniform faced from the occasional very grateful for all you do female public. And Connie had found out about it, at least on 2 separate occasions. She had packed their 2 kids up and headed back home to Chicago. That was tough for Jack in a lot of ways. Still, my Susie and me? I had had my own temptations, but as the leader of this unit of 9 officers, I thought I'd better try and set a good example. Plus, I love my wife and our 4 kids and sure as hell couldn't afford a divorce. I didn't make enough now to make Susie happy much, even working private security overtime about as much as I could. Susie and Jack Carter? I couldn't see that. Either way, our marriage had always been a bit rocky. For the life of me, I don't know why she basically chose me. We all went to the same junior high school, but she was 2 years younger than me, and her brother Charlie and I were best friends, even though we lived in different neighborhoods and social strata. My family was strictly working middle class, paycheck to paycheck. The Scrandons were pretty well off, not rich, but they had money, and they knew it, especially his parents and the brat, Susie. But Charlie wasn't like that. We both played the 3 major sports in high school: baseball, basketball, and football. We lettered in all 3, and by our junior year, both of us started on the baseball and football teams. He was a receiver, and I was a fullback. He was a pitcher, and I was a catcher. He was flashier, and I was a blue-collar plugger, but we were still very close on and off the field. He was smarter than me and, with his family's money, definitely going to college. I was going into the army to be all I could be and to get the college benefits that would follow, giving them 4 years of my life. I spent a lot of time at Charlie's house in high school, and it was always pretty obvious that Susie didn't really like me at all. She looked down on my situation in life. In high school, it was the same. She ran with a whole different rich crowd. Even as a sophomore, the crowd Charlie should have been part of but really didn't bother with. I had an okay, just casual date at my senior prom, doubling with Charlie and his girlfriend. Susie, as a sophomore, showed up on the arm of a typical rich a-hole senior, as expected. After high school, Charlie headed to Notre Dame, and I headed to Fort Benning in Columbus, Georgia, for basic combat training. I eventually became an MP, with some additional training in intelligence, and did 2 tours in Iraq. It was interesting work, not a lot of fun, but I survived. For years later, I was back in St. Louis, on a waiting list to maybe join the city or county police departments, and attending junior college, working on some academic credentials in criminology. It all felt like a bit of a joke to me based on what I'd already learned in the army, but one has to play the game. Charlie and I had kind of stayed in touch through occasional letters and emails, and he was coming home for the summer before starting law school. We finally caught up one night at our old neighborhood bar, and Susie came along with him. She had turned into quite a stunning young woman, and the most surprising thing was just how friendly she was to me. It was actually a very pleasant evening, just getting caught up. Charlie had some funny college stories, but Susie didn't say much about herself. She seemed mesmerized whenever I talked about my experiences in Iraq. When we finally left the bar, she actually kissed me on the cheek and said, "So great to see you again. Please stay in touch." Who was this girl, and what happened to Susan Scranton? I asked myself in amusement. The next day, Charlie called me again and finally said, "Listen, Susan really likes you. Basically, she had a crush on you all through high school, and you never paid any attention to her. Bet that surprises you, eh?" I could hear him grinning on the phone. "You could have fooled me," was all I could say. Yep, sometimes girls and women are a little strange that way. But she did, and she still does. And she's had a rough couple of years. She basically couldn't handle college, too many parties with too many rich, privileged a-holes, too much booze, too much ecstasy, and too many men, I'm afraid. She had to leave school, just got out of rehab, and she's doing her 12-step stuff now. If you call her, just be gentle, okay? And I hate to say this about my own sister, but you probably shouldn't get serious about her. But last night was fun, and we should do it again soon, okay? And we did. It became pretty much a weekly thing all summer. Sometimes Susie came with him, and sometimes she didn't. I found myself missing her when she didn't show up and finally gave her a call on some pretext. We ended up with just a lunch date. Eventually, she started talking about herself more, opening up. She couldn't apologize enough for being such a brat to me in high school. I merely said, "You should be apologizing," rather than the somewhat cooler truth. I hadn't really noticed or been bothered by it back then. But she was beautiful now, and with a much more pleasant personality. Eventually, it developed into a dating relationship, and finally, we became exclusive. Night with Susie was incredible. She might have flunked out of college academically, but she emerged with a graduate degree in intimate. Most of it was probably natural talent, but all of her knowledge and skills couldn't be. I wasn't a virgin myself, not since my junior year in high school. Being a starter on the football team, especially a regional winning squad, had something to do with that. I'd had more than a few hookups in the army too, some of those girls quite talented themselves. But Susie was in a whole other league, maybe out of my league, but she always seemed satisfied enough with me. So, despite her parents' reluctance, if not outright objections, Susan married me as soon as I was accepted onto the St. Louis County Police Force. I don't actually remember ever asking her. Her more dominant personality traits were re-emerging. Whatever Susie wants, Susie gets. She got pregnant almost immediately, and Kimberly, our first daughter, was born just about 1 year after our wedding. 2 years later, John James Thornton was born, my firstborn son. 3 years after that, our second daughter, Parker, arrived, and finally, 4 years later, little Abigail. All our kids are just average, beautiful, and normally healthy, thank God. After each birth, Susan had a bit of postpartum depression for a month or 6 weeks. Otherwise, she was a great mother and loved our kids wholeheartedly. She never worked outside the home, but working inside the home with young kids is hard and worthy work, and I never doubted it. After Parker was born, Susie started the pill again for birth control, just as she had in her senior year of high school and all through college. Her personality seemed to change just a bit, not quite as stable and calmly satisfied day in and day out. By then, I was away from home more than I ever wanted to be, but I was in the TAC Ops unit now. Training, night shifts, and call-outs took a lot of time from home life. I don't quite know if she came off the pill on purpose or if it just failed, but she became pregnant with little Abby and obviously stopped taking them after Abby was born, almost 5 years ago. She got her tubes tied and nursed Abby for about 18 months, and then she really started changing. Our nightlife had never been boringly stable. It was always kind of a feast or famine thing, with my work schedules, the pregnancies, breastfeeding, and her running ragged after little kids. We both always enjoyed intimate when the stars finally aligned properly for us, but sometimes we'd go a whole week without making love or longer. We both could live with that, I thought. One real poison she had to deal with was her parents, Edith and Stanford, and even her sister Janice's opposition to me. Basically, they all hated me. I wasn't good enough for their little princess and couldn't really afford to keep her in the style they had accustomed her to, which they wanted above all else to continue. Ironically, they loved the grandchildren I sort of provided them, but I guess any old sperm donor could have done that. And a rich sperm donor would have been just so much better, like Janice's older and richer lawyer husband, Todd. I was sure they all gave her money, just for her or to help out, maybe monthly. She never said anything, and I didn't either, but I didn't like it much. It was interfering in my marriage and my family. After Abby quit nursing, Susie started taking a whole lot more me time for herself. She had never gotten anywhere near fat, but she had put on a few pounds through all those years of hard work, having and raising our beautiful kids. Now, she was almost obsessed with getting her college figure back. She also started dressing more nicely day in and day out, taking more care with her makeup, even changing her perfume, and nagging more than ever. Actually, just nagging, period, about how little money I brought home versus all the time I wasn't there helping her, and how she needed a break. And basically, our intimate life pretty much ended about 6 months ago, like maybe just once or twice in that whole time. One of her breaks was me watching the kids when I was home at night while she finally got to go out with her girlfriends for dinner and drinks, sans kids and husbands. I could understand most of this, just not quite the whole lack of night thing, especially as she was now back to being beautifully trim and cute, with her new old college body. Wasn't exercise supposed to increase libido for both sexes? I certainly stayed in shape myself because of my job, training, and periodic physical testing requirements, and I still felt I had a pretty healthy libido and was definitely missing my wife. And now this crap with Jack. I just checked out for the day, told my captain I had something personal to do, but had my phone and would respond if anything came up. Then I went home to talk to my wife. It was close to our normal shift change time, though I seldom could get home at that time. So, I was about an hour early today. Susie was all dressed up. "Oh, good, you're home early. No honey or sweetheart or even John. Listen, I'm going out tonight, and you've got the kids." I interrupted. "Maybe you are, and maybe you aren't," I said in my professional voice, not one she had ever heard before from me. "What?" she kind of spluttered. "We need to talk first, and you need to tell me what the hell is going on." Now she got a little defensive, with the classic shifty eyes. "Nothing's going on, I just need a break tonight. Look me in the eyes and tell me exactly who you're going to be with tonight, and where." That's when she got real red in the face, and it blew up. I was blown away. My nice little home blew up, all right. I'm meeting Jack tonight, and he's buying dinner, like on a date, a real date, and I just might thank him the way I thanked so many nice boys in college who treated me well. Not like you. You're nothing. My wife has gone insane, I thought, just saying it to myself. Don't you say that. Don't you dare say that to me. I have given you the best years of my life. I've given you everything, and what did you give me? Nothing, because you are nothing. Jack is exactly right about you. I'm taking the kids over to my mom's, and I want you out of my house when I get back. You'd better be gone because I'm bringing Jack here tonight. I'm finally going to get some good night for a damn change. My wife had just gone insane. I wasn't going to let the kids get in the car with her right now, that was for sure. I almost whispered, just talking to myself, Charlie was right all along. And that's when she turned purple, called 911, and claimed I was beating her. Then she called Jack to come save her. My captain and Brandon showed up right after the patrol car did. Jack, at least, was smart enough not to show up. My wife was blubbering, making all kinds of incoherent accusations, but there were obviously no signs of any injuries to her. The captain was sympathetic and just said, "Is there anyone who can look after the kids tonight?" As much as I hated it, I said, "Yeah, her folks. Let's get them over here. You should probably just leave for tonight. We can't leave you two together, John. I'm so sorry for all this." "Yeah, me too," was all I could say. As soon as her mother Edith and Janice showed up, I tried to talk to my kids, but they all looked shell-shocked, kind of scared of me. They were thinking I must have done something to their mom. Yep, even I thought I must have. But I didn't have a clue what. Brandon offered me his couch, but I opted for a motel room. I just wanted to be alone. I missed my family terribly. The next day at work, I had looked hard at Jack a few times, but somehow never caught his eye. Around 4 p.m., I was served with a restraining order. I wasn't allowed within 500 feet of my home, my wife, or my kids. I grabbed Jack and hauled him off to a private office. Half my team started going for their guns just reflexively, seeing how I looked and acted, but I waved them off. "What the hell have you done?" I asterisk Cole. He finally looked me in the eye and said, "All I did was be your friend. How the hell could you have abused her all those years? Are you insane too? I never touched Susan like that, not once, not even in play. Why would she lie to me?" Jack said, "I don't know, but she has. And if you believe her over me, you're one sad, stupid man, and God help us all. Get out of here." I sat there, considering how to get a lawyer. This was not going to be good. Basically, just by lying so brazenly and convincingly, backed by her mom and dad's testimony as to their own suspicions and how they trusted their daughter implicitly, and with little 12-year-old Kimberly being so scared and confused by all of this, the restraining order was continued pending further review. Susie tried to smile in triumph, but she actually just looked a little confused herself. Even my own folks sided with her, looking at me like I was roadkill. I think I overheard someone whisper, "It must be PTSD, the poor woman." About a week later, I was served again, divorce papers. And word got back to me, Jack was now openly bragging about how great intimate with Susan was. He might even marry her once she dumped me legally. Meanwhile, let's see what Susan was thinking. I retreated into the bathroom, then called Jack and talked to him for a long time after John left and Edith and Janice got the kids sorted out. Jack was just really sweet. I had known him for a long time, just casually, as one of John's friends from his army days. And now, he was under John in the SWAT squad. But we only really got to know each other much better about 4 weeks ago. About 6 months ago, the veil started dropping from my eyes, and it was like I saw John for the first time in our whole married life, as he really was. He repulsed me now in so many ways, and he no longer even pretended to want to touch me. He must be screwing someone else. I became a little obsessed about that. Was it an affair with one woman or many, like Jack Carter once did? I knew about Jack and his divorce from Connie, of course. They were both our friends once. Edith and Janice fanned these flames and suggested I get myself back in my best shape, put myself out there a little more, because you deserve so much more in a man than John, someone like Dee or Todd, a man who can really take care of you in all ways. A new car, a nice big house, maids, and someone who puts you first, not second to some shitty job. And I did that. Got back in shape. John never even seemed to notice, and I just kept getting more unhappy. I started thinking back to all those great times I had in college before John re-entered my life. I was happy then, I was ecstatic then, and would give almost anything to feel like that once more. I started going out for dinner with Janice and some of her richer girlfriends about once a week. Just us girls, a break from the kids and husbands. Well, those of us still married, generally. 1 or 2 divorcees were included, and they always wanted to eat someplace that also had some dancing and singles action. Even Janice liked that idea. About 4 weeks ago, Jack was at the club we were all at. Janice and her friend Vicky were already dancing with some guys who had asked them. I had been asked, but was playing coy. Jack came up to our table and, after a little small talk, asked me to dance, and I decided to accept. He was a handsome man, even out of uniform, in good shape and very strong like John, but sweeter somehow. Also, more dangerous, since I knew he screwed around on Connie. It was a really nice feeling being in his arms while we slow danced. I liked that, too, and thought maybe I could trust him, or at least control him well enough for what I wanted. "I'm having some issues with John," I started out. "Sorry to hear that," he replied naturally. "We haven't been happy together for a long time, and he never touches me anymore. Oh gee, I used to be pretty wild back in college. You probably think this is terrible of me now, a wife and mother, but I was wondering if I could trust you." "Absolutely," he replied rather passionately. Yep, he wanted in my pants. Good. Maybe he would get there, maybe not, we'd see. I just feel like taking a little ecstasy again. Know where I might safely and discreetly find some? He smiled, kind of triumphantly. I blushed and started acting all insulted, but he laughed and said, "That's all I meant," and casually handed me the pill, acting like he was just tenderly touching my open hand for a moment. I casually swallowed it down and took another big gulp of my margarita, 4th one of the night. Jesus. I finally experienced a little feeling of joy again in my now dreary life. Jack and I danced some more, and I purposefully tilted my hips. Jack wanted some private time with me now, and I decided I did too, but only to a point. Janice had driven, but was now busy dancing with the same guy for quite a while. I just told her Jack was going to drive me home, and she smiled and gave me a thumbs up. I could read her mind. Jack wasn't marriage material, but good enough as a toy and to really get over John and then dump him, finally. Maybe, I thought, as well. He kissed and I kissed him long while he parked right in my driveway, actually hoping John might notice the watch. After a few minutes of this, I went inside. It was about midnight, and everyone was pretty much sound asleep, of course, even John. I was still feeling pretty good. Well, screw John the husband and provider, but he did have a pretty nice tool, and I wanted it right now, probably for the last time. I pulled the covers back and caught him with a sleep hard-on. Maybe he was dreaming about one of his bimbos, but I could care less, thinking about Jack and when I would let him have a night with me. It was on with Jack now, and it was going to happen. I started rubbing John's, needing him to wake up. I even slapped his face a little to wake him up, and when he started mumbling. I still had my party dress on and probably smelled like Jack's cologne. John was starting to get a tad frantic since it had been literally months since we had had a night, though I was absolutely convinced he was getting his rocks off elsewhere with someone else. At that thought, I leaned down more and started kissing him. You piece of, you're actually practically kissing Jack. It was a good night. About a week later, I was out with the girls again while clueless John watched our kids. I didn't even like my own kids anymore, and that, as much as anything, made me feel like crying day in and day out. I blamed it on John as well. It was all his fault, all my misery. Damn into hell. I had traded texts with Jack after our session last week, and he knew where we were going to be tonight. Janice was driving again, and 2 other, different girls were joining us. They wouldn't notice Jack as anything but just another guy trying to hit on us, on me. And Janice heartily approved of a little action on the side for me, and by now I had figured out that's exactly what she was doing herself. After our dinner, Jack appeared, and soon we were dancing again. It was so funny and typical. Yep, I knew he was thinking about last time and now drooling for more. I started telling him more about how terrible life with John was and had always been, how he just made me and our kids so unhappy. I even hinted at physical abuse at times. He ate it all up, got red, and looked madder at John than me. It was almost funny, but now it was time for a little joy. You got it? I asked. Yep, but I'm not giving you any unless we go somewhere private first. Oh ho, a little blackmail pressure. I could play this game. Oh, Jack, don't be like that, please. I'm still married, even though it doesn't feel like it anymore. Susie, baby, I want to make you happy in every way. I don't just want to screw you, I want to love you, to make love to you properly, not just making out in a car. Where would we go? Let's just go to my place. My apartment's not far. Maybe, but I can't stay all night, not even real late. 1 a.m. at the latest, until I walk through my own front door. Do you understand? Yes, I'll do what you want, dear. Okay, let's take it now. Right. I can't do fun pills myself, too risky for my career, but I will tonight so we can really share this experience. And we did. And I had him. I was thinking to myself as I went to the restroom before we left the club. I took off my panties and hose. Then I found Janice on the dance floor and told her I was leaving with Jack again. She noticed I wasn't wearing pantyhose and just smirked. Screw his brains out, sis, she said. I'm going to screw this guy senseless tonight. Wow, I had not guessed that about my baby sister. As soon as we got to the apartment, our clothes came off, and Jack picked me up and carried me to his bedroom. That feeling of almost unlimited energy and joy fueled our own abandonment to pure lust and drove us for the next 3 hours. I didn't make it home until 2 a.m. and still couldn't sleep. But as always, John was sleeping like the dead. I didn't need him anymore either. I was satiated intimacy but still felt strangely unfulfilled. The next morning, I felt even more depressed, and only the thought of the next time with sweet Jack made any of it bearable. I could barely talk, I was sore from all the yelling I'd done last night. Back to John. I caught Jack in the restroom and beat the crap out of him. He tried to defend himself, but I had all the rage on my side. I tried hard not to break anything important job-wise, but I think I probably did get his nose. Afterward, I told him, "You can do what you want with that crazy bleep now, but I better never hear the slightest rumor it's being discussed in our locker room again. If it ever gets back to me, and you hurt my kids, by word or deed, I will put a bullet right between your eyes. Remember Heron and I are?" At that, he turned white. Message delivered. I had done it before. So Susan divorced me, and Jack moved in with her after a fairly lengthy CPS investigation. I could finally see my kids again, but only with chaperone visits at first. Kimberly especially seemed to hate me now. She wouldn't hug me and only answered like her mom, speaking in acid-filled tones of disgust. The smaller kids were a little happier, but almost acted scared of me. It didn't take a genius to figure out Mom, Grandma Edith, and Jan were bad-mouthing me constantly. And some of it must be true because I had abandoned them. Maybe even my own mom was on Susan's side. My life was pretty much in purgatory, caught in that gray nothingness between light and darkness, between happiness and utter despair. I sure as hell couldn't lose focus at work. I had to meet my child support payments. Plus, I might get killed or get some of my team killed if my mind wandered. I didn't have enough money to even consider dating someone else, nor the energy or interest. Let's see, only a few more years until little Abby turned 18. I was sure by then none of my kids would talk to me, so I might as well look forward to the end of that pure financial burden. Thinking like this were the only times I cried a little, drank too much, and occasionally found myself staring at a 9mm bullet and my Glock in my hand. About a year into this so-called life was when I got shot. I was lead, as always, bursting into a commercial real estate office with an unknown number of perps and a multiple hostage situation. After all negotiations had failed, and every attempt at gathering 100% accurate intel, the exact number and location of the perps was still uncertain. The tear gas and flashbangs went off inside, the door was breached, and I went in with my shotgun at the tactical ready position. Brandon and Jack were right behind me, or so I thought, but they somehow got hung up a bit. Then, a perp appeared at my 6 and looked to have a gun pointed right at the back of my head. Brandon nailed him, center target, with a shotgun, a buckshot load right in the upper back. The autopsy later showed one pellet severed his spinal cord just below the neck level, instantly paralyzing and killing him, so his trigger finger didn't even twitch. But Jack's shot was way off target, half of it hit the perp at hip level, and the rest hit me in my right upper leg and hip below my vest. It broke my pelvic bone and thigh bone, but all the pellets missed anything too vital, like my balls. A bone fragment did nick my femoral artery, though, and I almost bled out right there. Only the fact that fire and rescue paramedics were on site and ready saved my life. I was unconscious for about 48 hours as 2 surgeries were performed on me. When I finally halfway regained consciousness, I had a strange dream. Susan was in the room with me, kind of crying to herself, "Oh John, oh John, oh John, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I just didn't know what was wrong with me." I faded back out, dimly remembering hearing stuff like that over and over again. Just a strange post-anesthesia dream, I thought. When I finally did wake all the way back up a few days later, Susan, Kimberly, and JJ came to visit me in the hospital. JJ was really excited because I had been shot and was now a celebrity hero on all the news. Thank God none of the hostages were harmed, but 2 perps were down forever, and the 3rd was also wounded. Even in the same hospital, Kimberly seemed somewhat pleasant and even happy to see me. I had no clue what to say to these people who were once my family and my blood. I tried to make a joke and said something like, "Well, Jack had his chance and missed," but Susan turned red and then white and ran out of the room. It almost looked like she had tears in her eyes. Kimberly just said, "Mom's not too happy right now. Jack's not living with us anymore and isn't allowed to come around us. Mom hasn't been happy for a long time since you went away and left us." I was too tired to argue with crazy people and even tried to set the factual record straight. I basically just told them I needed to rest now. Susan kept bringing my kids back to see me every day, but we didn't talk. What was the point? I mean, we were way beyond men are from Mars and women are from Venus. It was more like I was from a regular matter universe and Susie was from a bizarre antimatter universe. What could we possibly have in common to talk about? At least the kids were talking to me and not acting scared of me or just hating me. Susan finally asked, "Where are you going when they discharge you? You will need somebody to help you. Kimberly and I would like to do that. I've already arranged to go into a live-in VA rehab center, so it's not necessary now." What was wrong with Susan? Was she planning on murdering me if she got me in her power? I tried to remain civil, but my skin was crawling a little. It was just a bit too weird after the past 16 months, not to mention the previous 13 years. "Look, once I get all situated, I'll call Edith and give her the info on visiting hours, and maybe she can bring the kids for a visit one day on the weekend." Okay, well, I was trying to let her off the hook. I wanted to see my kids, but not her. I just figured the stress of being around me was making her all weird, and I sure didn't need her pity just because I was wounded. I was alive, and I'd be okay again, but I was definitely leaving Dodge after I recovered. Susan didn't look relieved as they all left, just depressed. Welcome to my daily world. At least Susan had had lots of hot intims since I walked out on them. I had a left hand for a hot date once a week if it was a good week, although every once in a while, I would go out for a drink after work, still in uniform, and let some woman pick me up, one-night stands, not dating. It really was amazing how the uniform was such a turn-on for some women. Maybe that's all Susan ever really saw, just the uniform, not me. And then not Jack, not really. She could find another man in uniform or not, anytime she wanted, like right now, tonight. So don't emote some undepressed BS around me, please. Now back to John. Brandon had been by a couple of times to see me, but Jack hadn't. Jack was on administrative leave right now while the whole thing was investigated. The other officers behind Jack testified they thought Jack kind of stumbled and then fired totally accidentally, but there was just no way to spin it good. He was probably going to be kicked off the SWAT team no matter what. Control of one's weapon at all times was the critical skill and ability. Purposefully wounding a fellow SWAT team member for personal reasons wasn't too good either. Duh. Best case, he'd be off the team and just get another police officer job. Worst case, firing from the whole force and possibly facing a negligent firearm assault charge because he shot me in the 5th place. I also found out Susan had literally made Jack crazy. She now had a restraining order against him to stay away from her and was evidently frightened of him. Damn it. My kids might really need me, and I was pretty helpless. I only hoped he remembered Heron, dead Heron, another scumbag who wouldn't be hurting anyone else ever again. I think I could figure out what happened. Jack believed every lie Susan told him. She was just a poor, helpless damsel in distress. I was the dragon, and he was her knight in shining armor rescuing her. Her knowledge in bed really sealed the deal. When he finally got a taste of it, he was convinced she really loved him as he loved her and that I somehow was mind-controlling her to reject him. Now, even before I could walk on my own again, Jack had already been arrested once for violating the restraining order. He was now on notice at work, one more violation, and he would be summarily fired for cause. The police union couldn't help him one bit either. Poor Jack was literally addicted to Susan, he couldn't stay away. He was arrested again for trying to break into her house when, luckily, a patrol car arrived just in time. Now he was sitting in jail while the ADA and his lawyer argued over bail. The judge sure didn't want more bad nationwide publicity about a bad cop in St. Louis, like the one out on bail who then killed another cop's ex-wife. So, he set bail at $1 million cash, and Jack stayed in jail. Susan's mom did bring the kids by just about every weekend, sometimes both days. All of a sudden, dear old mom, Edith, was a lot friendlier to me than the last time we were together. She said to the kids, "Wait outside the room for me just a little bit. I need to talk to your dad privately." I wished I could be sure this was going to be interesting. First, I want to apologize to you for believing all of Susan's lies. I remained silent. Susan's not well mentally. She has been seeing a psychiatrist and is on some antidepressants now that seem to be helping a lot. She had developed a bipolar condition no one recognized and was in a manic phase when she totally lost it. It may have been kicked off or made much worse by her birth control pills. Those hormones affect the brain as well as the body. That might have been what contributed to her problems in high school and then college as well. I am ashamed to admit I put her on the pill back then just to keep her out of trouble. I almost shed a tear. Susan is desperately ashamed of how she acted and desperately wants to see you again. Can you possibly forgive her, and me, and my whole family for how we treated you? Your kids really need you now as well. It was all very scary for them. She stopped talking because she could see the rage in my face. You know it was your total unwarranted hate for me all these years that put my kids through that hell, don't you? Why shouldn't I snap your neck? Her ego and pride wouldn't let her acknowledge it. She got all stiff and just kind of walked out. Screw them all, is all I could think, except my kids. I'd sleep on it. I had a lot of questions. It all seemed a little too pat. Sorry, hon, for kicking you out and screwing Jack for a year. I was just mentally ill, but I'm better now. Come on home. She was at least rational enough to convince everyone else in the whole world, apparently, that I was the crazy one, even my own kids. She was rational enough to dress real nice and act all pretty for Jack, but not for her husband. Nothing about that seemed to tell me a lot right there. She was also rational enough to totally fool Jack, a trained police officer, with all manner of lies. He never spotted any inconsistencies. Granted, she probably could nuance just about anything with her special tongue twister BJ's helping cloud poor foolish Jack's mind. And if she was nuts, how come Jack was the one locked up and not her? I hobbled on home to my crappy 2-bedroom apartment. I was cleared to go back to work, but obviously only for desk work. I would still need a couple of months of both PTSD therapy and training to get even close to field ready again. The weirdest thing about going back to work was realizing how deeply unpopular I was with my own team. Now, Brandon was still my friend, and the captain was supportive, but everyone else had decided it was all my fault. Susan leaving me for Jack, then driving Jack crazy, and even Jack shooting me, stalking Susan, and being in jail himself. Jack was somehow the victim of my craziness. But I didn't care. The captain warmly reminded me that I was still on the promotion list and had definitely moved further up that list. Good things are going to happen for you soon, John. Just hang in there, bud. But I was getting out of Dodge. Through my contacts with old Army MP comrades and the semi-annual SWAT nationwide meetings and seminars I regularly attended since becoming sergeant, I had been offered the job of leading Mobile, Alabama's smaller SWAT unit as their lieutenant. I had accepted, pending working through my 30-day notice period in St. Louis. I also instructed my lawyer to modify visitation from every other weekend to 1 whole month each summer. I hated to do it, but I had to move on from this whole unfathomable mess. I felt like I definitely had a future down there, and I would feel a hell of a lot more comfortable with those southern redneck strangers at my back than my urban buddies here next time they hit the fan. Right about now, Stanford had a massive heart attack and died. Obviously, I wasn't going to the funeral. Maybe that was small of me, but he never liked or respected me, and I respected his feelings enough to honor them even in his death. Small of me, maybe I could have gone and spit in his coffin and pissed on his grave, just being honest here. Charlie came back to town for the funeral and finally called me. He was now a pretty much big-shot lawyer in Chicago as a litigator, a very successful criminal defense attorney. I had thought he would go the DA route, and he still might. The night after the funeral, we met at our old favorite neighborhood spot. After small talk, he ordered a couple of shots of Irish whiskey and said, "Come on, John, just one shot for the old man." I smiled and drank. "I am so sorry about Susan, John. I really am. I wish I had heard about what was happening sooner and could have gotten here." "Maybe," I said. "I don't know, Charlie. You tried to warn me a long time ago, and I guess you were right all along." "No, actually, I don't think I was. As the years passed, I was happy you ignored me, and Susan got herself together so very well. I really love my nieces and nephews, and I'm going to start visiting back home more often now. Edith told me what she told you. It's not. What I'm trying to say here is that Susan really is mentally ill, but it is treatable with proper medication. She has a good psychiatrist now monitoring the pills, of course, but also trying to help her back from the intense shame and guilt she feels about you and how she treated you, plus her own broken heart. You no longer love her, but she loves you now more than ever before. She was on suicide watch for 2 weeks during her last breakdown and last stay in a facility about a year ago. You never knew that, did you? My mom, excuse me, who I do love dearly, kept all that from you." "No, I hadn't heard this before. What can I say, Charlie? I don't love Susan anymore. The only way I can keep my sanity is to not love her anymore, but I won't hate her either. I will try to at least be friendly and respect her as the mother of my children from here on out if she will try and do the same. I just can't stand any more craziness. She somehow managed to turn just about everyone I know against me. I can't take any chances at all with her anymore. You can tell her this if you want to. I'll talk to her. Everyone is really sorry about all this, John. You didn't deserve it. Susan didn't deserve it either. She's almost driving herself crazy just mentally trying to understand how she could do all the things she did, especially the hateful things she said and did to you. That's what the ongoing therapy is for. Organic depression and mania caused all that. She's struggling with it, and I imagine you are as well. Let me just mention one more thing. My dad was a law enforcement officer in many ways, but he did make a lot of money and provided for his family. My inheritance now is roughly $1 million, Susan's is quite a bit more. Her whole worrying about money shouldn't be a factor anymore unless she is irreparably crazy and blows it all quickly like so many gamblers do. Watching how she handles that might help you make some proper judgments about her in the future, just saying. We talked about much more, including his own very successful life as a lawyer and the woman he was currently dating, who might be the one, or might not. He was a serial dater and probably wasn't quite ready to get off that treadmill yet. We promised to stay in touch better and more often than we had in the recent past. As we exited the club later that night, I couldn't quite get around to telling him about mobile. I had a feeling he'd try to talk me out of it. Right at the end of the night, he said, "Just remember all the years with Susan at her best. That's how she really is, a loving mother and a loving wife. That other Susan really isn't her." "Maybe," I replied, "but I know at least one man who absolutely loves that other Susan, or at least is absolutely obsessed with her, and he'll do anything to get her back. Which is the real Susan, really? I just can't know. I'm not God, and I can't look into her heart. Does Susan actually know herself? I feel sorry for her, and I feel sorry for me, and even for Jack and my kids. Is she going to eventually screw them over too, even more than she already has? Are you going to watch her closely now? I once did, and it made no difference, did it? So much for my friends and family and any support group. She made me feel alone, and I am as alone as I've ever been in my life, and finally happy about it. Tell her if she really loves me to let it lie. I hope she gets herself together because nobody has died yet, just me." I shut up a little, but I am getting very threatening letters from I'm pretty sure who, telling me to leave Susan alone if I know what's good for me. Tell Susan that as well and to be careful. She should think only about herself and our kids and not me or her supposed love for me. I understood he didn't look very happy, but he only nodded and smiled sadly. "Take care, good buddy." And I was on my way, heading south. Now, let's look at it from Susan's side. My life had slowly descended into hell over the last 2 years. It just gradually seemed to develop a general feeling of dissatisfaction that came and went at first, but then it came and stayed with me longer and slowly morphed into perpetual unhappiness and gloom. I tried to ignore it all at the beginning and just concentrate more on my kids and on John. I also tried to hide my unhappiness from them, of course. John worked very hard and tried to take care of us all financially as best he could, and he had an important job. It was often scary for me, and all his time away from us was an irritant. I knew he felt bad that money was always tight for us and that my not-so-nice parents and sisters seemed to take some glee in pointing that out to John every time we got together, at holiday gatherings, birthday parties, or just a weekend barbecue. In fact, John always held his temper and endured those slights quietly, all because of his love for me and our children, willing to share us with them. I loved him for that and so much more. Then my personal gloom deepened. I even lost all desire to have a night with my incredibly handsome husband, a man I had basically lusted after since I was 14 years old and first noticed him as a desirable boy of 16. I tried even harder to fix myself by dieting and exercising vigorously, talking myself into feeling better and dressing pretty, hoping that alone would make me feel more attractive. But nothing I tried had any effect at all. I felt helpless and scared. Somehow, I started rationalizing that it must be John's fault. Well, maybe Edith and Janice planted those seeds a bit, as I turned to them for advice, believing it was his job to keep me happy and that he wasn't doing it. I started drinking more and even going out with my sister for dinner and drinks about once a week. Janice kept insisting that John wasn't doing his job and keeping me happy. She never thought he could anyway. Then that whole crazy Jack thing happened, fueled by my desperate thinking that ecstasy could help me. I couldn't ask straight arrow John for that, while thinking that was just what I needed, just a little bit. All I could remember was how great it made me feel back in college, not the fact that it almost destroyed me back then. But Jack might be able to get it for me. All cops know how to score. That's almost a job requirement. The first time I asked him, I felt smart. Sigh. Well, that all worked for about 2 seconds. He quickly became obsessed with me, my body, and my lies I told quite shamelessly and believably about my love for him and my even greater hate for John. I'm sure I could have passed a lie detector test at that time. I almost believed in myself and never felt any remorse or guilt. And of course, the false love euphoria the pill produced felt real for both of us, at least until the pill wore off, at least for me, if maybe not Jack. Jack was almost insatiable when it came to night. With my kids at their grandparents' or even with John, we would both take some ecstasy and drink a little tequila, just starting to mess around with each other, waiting for the euphoric love feelings. We had animalistic intim and then collapsed, passing out to sleep for at least 4 hours straight. But then, inevitably, we would wake up again. Waking up was the problem. Not being able to sleep without intimate and pills was an even bigger problem. Each time I woke up, I always felt worse, never better, and I also missed John more and more while my feelings of hate for him increased. I blamed him for leaving me. Somehow, it was his fault that I was screwing Jack and had divorced him. He still should not have left me and our children. How could he have done that? How could I logically think these kinds of thoughts? The black hole I was in kept getting deeper and darker. This all made John even more of an enemy in my mind, and though my feelings for my kids were basically neutralized by my pervading gloom, I rationally determined they would never leave me. I would woo them with my love and also turn them against their dad with the same kind of intense lies I easily told Jack. Of course, they believed me even more than gullible adult Jack did. Then, about 7 months into my relationship with Jack, who was practically living with me, I woke up one morning after yet another intense, pill-fueled night of pure physical lustful debauchery and faux love. That night had ended with an almost out-of-body feeling for me, where I totally lost all control and then passed out for what I thought would be a few more hours of blessed sleep. When I next woke up, just 2 hours later, I was crying and hyperventilating and just couldn't stop, a full-blown panic attack or nervous breakdown. All Jack could do was call 911, and I spent the next 4 weeks in a recovery facility, the best clinic that my father, Stanford, could find and pay for. I guess I was just lucky. A very good psychiatrist, Dr. Rachel Horowitz, was assigned to assess and evaluate me and really try to find out what was going on. She undoubtedly saved my life. My folks took my kids in and didn't even tell John what was going on. He never guessed the kids were now so afraid of their dad that they could hardly talk to him by now, especially Kimberly. So on his weekends, which normally meant just a Saturday afternoon visit, watching a movie or eating some pizza, no one said a word about Mom being on a short vacation by herself. I was put on lithium and Valium initially, which worked fairly well to stop my crying Jag that first week. Then I started taking an NRI antidepressant while the Valium dosages were carefully decreased. About the second week, my actual sanity started returning along with all my memories of the past year, crystal clear. That's when I became suicidal. I had destroyed my marriage irreparably, and I was sure John could not possibly love me anymore after the cruel way I had treated him. I had also abused my children mentally with all the lies and turned them against their father in a most cruel and vicious way. Paradoxically, I was also a better mother to them in other ways, caring for them almost obsessively as mere pawns in the deranged game in my mind against John. I still could not understand why my own parents and sister had enabled me to do all this and even abetted this wanting destruction of John and my marriage. Why did they hate him so much? Why did they discount my own love for him throughout the happy years of my marriage? I now realize they disrespected me almost as much. Many really depressed people become dangerously suicidal as they start to recover, merely as they regain a minimal energy level that allows them to take action and end it all. My own mental condition was far worse at this point. Only after Dr. Horowitz was convinced I had passed that first crisis point and was starting to really feel empathy and love for my children once more, and I fully acknowledged what my suicide would do to them, was I granted a conditional release from the institution. However, I had to stay with my parents at first, not alone with my own children, and I met with Rachel 3 times a week for the first 2 months. Rachel tried to explain to me why I had turned on John, the man I loved and the one person who might have really helped me through all this. All couples have conflicts and disagreements in their relationships, every single one. What makes a marriage strong is not the lack of conflict, but rather the ability to navigate the ebb and flow of constant power struggles to determine who wears the pants. The fact is, both sometimes wear the pants in different spheres and responsibilities, from homemaking and child-rearing to social recreation decisions, financial priorities, and even frequency of night and personal likes and dislikes. The best couples almost intuitively work all this out in mutual, often unspoken agreement, determining which spouse makes the best decisions in various areas. Sometimes the woman, even if she is a stay-at-home mom, makes the best decisions on spending money. Sometimes the husband does. Sometimes one spouse makes all the best intimate activity decisions, and the same applies to social friends, recreation time, and money allocations, balancing pleasure versus discomfort for each in that area. For example, one spouse may like to dance while the other does not. Some level of compromise is always best. Those relationships where one partner unilaterally controls the other in all spheres very rarely work out best for either partner. That's an old catch-22 type of situation, where wives really aren't all that happy with their husband's control over them. How quickly would any normal man become bored and disinterested with a robot as a lover? Or how many women would enjoy a walking dildo with no surprises ever? This is what obsessive-compulsive controlling types can end up with as they dominate their partners. From what you've told me, you and John had a pretty good, normal conflict-type marriage with generally good compromise resolutions, working in different spheres. Read Proverbs 31 and reflect on that in the next few days, the worth of a good wife, and how even in such a supposed patriarchal society as Old Testament Judaism, the wife obviously made her own decisions in her own domain, whose opinion was valued by her husband and even other men outside her home. But conflict still existed in those marriages, including your own. John was a natural opponent to you in some ways throughout your marriage, and obviously, you couldn't ask him to get you ecstasy or any other illegal pill, which you logically thought you needed at that point. As your illness progressed, you lost your basic core emotional and rational assumptions about John and your marriage. A normal human mind is never totally and only rational, it can't be. That would actually be counter-survival for each individual and certainly counter-reproductive for the species in a strictly evolutionary sense. What purely rational woman would ever put herself through pregnancy and childbirth, with all that discomfort and the risk of serious injury or death? Let some other woman continue the species, that would be the best purely rational decision. Now that human technology and ingenuity have made it impossible without unintended pregnancy, worldwide birth rates are dropping almost like a rock, and demographic winter is approaching many of the most advanced countries and cultures. Rational women are choosing not to reproduce or are having no more than one child each. The human brain and mind are always influenced by largely uncontrollable and chaotic hormones and complex natural chemicals: testosterone, estrogen, progesterone, adrenaline, endorphins, serotonin, oxytocin, and more are being discovered every day. All of us poor humans have to make innumerable decisions daily based on incomplete information, like what the man sitting across from me on a date is really thinking. Sure, all of us women know he wants to get into our pants, but is it really love, or is it just for hot night? Or maybe it's simply a conquest, a notch on his bedpost, not even mutually enjoyable intimate. So we all play various flirting games, trying to gather more information to make both a rational and a more accurate intuitive decision. Men do the same thing. Plus, women are more complicated and actually harder to understand purely rationally, or so every man I've ever talked to tells me, including my husband and my sons. But you lost touch with all your actual solid intuition, the foundational emotional bedrock assumptions that you loved John and that John loved you. That's what the chemical imbalance in your brain did to you. With that gone, all you had left was the logical portion trying to figure things out. Why were you so dissatisfied and unhappy? Pure logic dictated that it had to be John causing it somehow. You became like an egotistical computer, with no emotional empathy ability at all. This same logical portion of your brain drove you to self-medication efforts, alcohol, ecstasy, and feel-good intimate with someone other than John. John had already been eliminated as any possible help because, logically, he was the cause, just because he was there when you started feeling all bad and depressed, ipso facto. I know I look doubtful about all this, and in fact, it was pretty much the most Rachel ever tried to spell out for me in one session. This was the first of many, with me always doing most of the talking, trying to figure things out for myself. But she ended the session with this: we both know you are a naturally intelligent woman, maybe even smarter than your brother Charlie. Unfortunately, a lot of smarts are sometimes accompanied by a tendency to mental instability, chemically, in some people. Your own chemical imbalances may have just naturally developed as you aged, body chemistries and all of us gradually change over time. or your own taking of birth control hormones and then recreational pills in high school and college may have set up some damage, further worsened by that progesterone birth control formulation you took after Parker was born. There's a definite link there with other bipolar patients, at least anecdotally in the literature. We also both know you have a strong personality and go after what you feel you really want, and now you want your husband, marriage, and family back just like before. Just seeing and talking with John is the next logical step, but please do not try to do that right now. We still have a lot of things to work through, both with mental therapy and also pill therapy, to get you into as stable a brain chemistry position as possible, maybe even at some point off all medication. But this is going to take time. A setback for you personally after any progress with John might prove even more disastrous. I have seen that too many times. Okay, I could see her points, but it was very hard to mentally agree with her assessment. I now so wanted to see and talk with John again. I just knew he would understand after I explained it all to him, but I wisely decided to wait just a little while longer. What I could do, though, was try to straighten out my kids about the truth instead of the lies, and even that was harder than I ever thought it would be. Kimberly, in particular, wouldn't budge. That all doesn't matter. He still left us. He is bigger and stronger than you, and he shouldn't have left us. If he really loved us, he wouldn't have done that. I tried to explain how I had so easily gotten the restraining order and had basically all the police and courts on my side, but she still wasn't buying it. To her, I seemed more crazy now than I did before. I had been so nice to them, rational and strong, before. Now I seemed nervous and unsure, less believable in everything I said. How would I have appeared to John in this state as well? It finally hit me, and I was unsure. Every day, I wondered if this was the day my meds stopped working and I would start that long, gradual slide back into insanity without actually noticing. The meds also had some inevitable side effects that I had to work through and adjust for. The NDRI I was currently on completely squashed my libido. Well, that was probably a good thing right now, actually, but it wouldn't do if I ever got to the point where John wanted even to just have a night with me again. I'd take that instead of REM marriage right now in a heartbeat. But I knew John couldn't handle an unresponsive me, and I couldn't very well fake it. Then John got shot, and I almost fell completely apart again. I barely kept it together enough. Oh, how I wished it had been me who got shot and not John. I deserved it, not him, and I was completely helpless to help him as I so wanted to. At least Kimberly was maybe starting to believe me a little bit. It was now Jack who was becoming a major problem. He didn't believe me at all and kept trying to see me and be with me. Maybe he had shot John on purpose. If he had, that would have been my fault as well. I felt sorry for what I had done to Jack and tried to let him down easy. I told him I was very mentally ill and in therapy, slowly recovering, and I was sorry I led him to believe I loved him. But the fact is, I didn't, never did, and never would. I guess there's no easy way to get that message across to another person, especially one with whom, just 2 months before, I had been intimate every which way, both physically and mentally. He just couldn't grasp that. He just wouldn't believe me now. I guess he was addicted to the night we had had, and even the false love feelings from the ecstasy he occasionally took with me just reinforced my lies and his own true feelings. It didn't even faze him when I told him the medicine I was on basically made me an intimate zombie. He said, "I just want to take care of you, baby." But I couldn't help but think he merely wanted to screw me until I died. I finally had to get a restraining order against him to leave me and the kids alone, and he still wouldn't stop until he was in jail. Then my dad died so suddenly. He wasn't a perfect man or a perfect father, but he was still just dad to me, and in my current condition, it was very difficult. I was back on Valium for a bit just to get through the funeral. Charlie came back for it and handled everything that needed handling. Edith was a mess. Janice had her own problems now, as Todd had evidently found out about her extracurricular activities and new hobby and was divorcing her. Janice was depressed herself, not chemically like me, thank God, but evidently, just hooking up with strangers wasn't nearly as much fun when not married to some boring older rich man who otherwise took care of her quite well. And Janice even blamed me for her own problems. Screw her. I was starting to look at my own family much more objectively and critically than I ever had before. Psychotherapy could be good for that. All of a sudden, Janice was having to watch her own spending and even constrain it. She would get some okay alimony for a while, but her own inheritance was even less than Charlie's since Dad was so proud of her and sure that she had married well and securely. I got about $2.5 million for me and my kids. Dad wanted to try and help me as much as he could. Maybe he even hoped it would entice John back into our marriage in the end. Stanford understood the terrible mistakes that Edith and Janice had made in dissing John and how I really had gone crazy and never really stopped loving him. Now I just wanted to get back to what I had. But Stanford also never comprehended how little money actually meant to John. He was only ever concerned that I had enough to be happy and satisfied, and now my new wealth might only serve to keep him permanently away. I instructed my lawyer to draw up the papers ending his alimony payments to me. At least I could do that much for him. Charlie also told me about his last meeting with John and how John no longer hated me but was actually too scared to love me anymore. Well, that might be good. Maybe that was a tiny opening I could work with once Rachel finally released me to try. Maybe I was coming back off the Valium when I heard the final bit of devastating news. John was moving about 650 miles away to Mobile, Alabama, all the way down to the Gulf Coast. Would I ever see him in person again? Actually get to tell him what had happened and why his kids needed him. And I was pretty sure he needed his kids. Did he need me even a little bit? Now let's check it out from John's side. I arrived in Mobile on March 15th, the Ides of March, sometimes a sunny day with temperatures in the upper 70s. The dogwoods were blooming, and I had already passed a lot of live oak trees filled with Spanish moss. This definitely wasn't Missouri anymore. It was a long day in the saddle, driving the whole way in one day, basically just me and my clothes in one car. That's all I brought with me. I would stay in a motel tonight and start looking for my furnished apartment tomorrow, a total clean start. I was looking forward to my new job, my new responsibilities, and a reunion with one old friend, Benjamin Frenchy Francois, a Cajun from Mobile who was my best buddy in Iraq and now a Mobile police officer. There had been a fairly large Cajun population around Mobile for a long time, working in the forests and swamps and farming, or in the paper pulp mills and plants like the Southern Company ones, or just shrimping and crabbing in the Gulf. There was a lot of water and swamps around Mobile. Mobile Bay was roughly 20 miles long and 5 miles wide, and only on average about 6 to 8 feet deep at low tide, with several dredged shipping channels for the large commercial ships. It was a pretty muddy body of water, not nearly as clear as Pensacola or Destin and other Florida bays further east. Mobile Bay was kind of a dividing line. To the east, still in Alabama, were the resort beaches and area of Gulf shores, then Pensacola, Florida, Fort Walton Beach, Destin, and all, with white beaches and crystal clear waters. Mobile Bay, to the west, included Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas, down to Brownsville. The Gulf waters and bays were much more likely to be muddy looking and not so clear. The Mississippi River itself contributed a lot to that, dumping immense amounts of river silt from basically the whole U.S. between the Rockies and the Appalachians into the Gulf. Mobile Bay had several major and minor rivers dumping their own silt loads: Dog River, Fish River, the Tensaw River, and Mobile River, which were basically part of the Tennessee-Tombigbee waterway that provided a cost-efficient alternative for Tennessee, Indiana, Ohio, and other eastern states west of the Appalachians to get their bulk produce to the Gulf through Mobile rather than through New Orleans via the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. All that water meant my new SWAT team needed to be highly trained in potential waterborne situations, everything from recreational and houseboat domestic blowups to commercial fishing boats and ships of all sizes, even potential large container freighters subject to hijacking attempts for money or terror, and not just more normal land-based situations calling for a military unit-type response. I could see, just driving down I-65 and into the city, the potential challenges of this new opportunity. I was really eager to meet Frenchy and get caught up personally, but also get clued in on the whole current SWAT setup at the same time. I always had to guard against any or at least too much perceived professional favoritism. Previous job evaluations and promotion status lists had to be maintained in continuity for everyone in the squad. But unless Frenchy was also possessed now by some evil spirit like had gotten into Jack, I couldn't imagine that kind of problem with him fostering schism and breaking team cohesion. He was a big, likable, friendly extrovert who personified let's have fun right up until someone pissed him off, then he turned on them, and they rolled over. He was one of those scary strong guys. I was a high school fullback offered only a partial Division II football college scholarship to Northwest Oklahoma State, which I passed on. He was a starting linebacker for Alabama for 2 years before his partying got him in trouble, and then he joined the Army. I had 3 days before my official introduction and start date, enough time to find my already online rented furnished apartment and settle in a bit. I finally hooked up with Frenchy at a little dive called the Blue Crab Bar and Restaurant. Their breaded fried crab claws were really good. Frenchy raved about their crab gumbo, but I wasn't so sure. Maybe that was an acquired taste. Frenchy had finally settled down and just gotten married himself to a nice Cajun woman named Gigi. She was absolutely gorgeous in the photos Frenchy showed me, just slightly darker complected than his own light skin, with jet black hair and very dark brown eyes, a blend of French, African, and American Indian genetic heritage. And speaking that strange Acadian French Creole patois, it was her voice that got me. Johnny boy, she sings like an angel, but just talking as well, I was like in a trance. And married before I knew it. What are your wife and the kids coming down? He hadn't heard, not happening. She divorced me. I showed him my ring finger. Oh, what did you do, Johnny? You got 4 little ones, right? I don't really know, just me being me, I guess. All of a sudden, she wasn't touching me and was screwing somebody else. And now she and my kids all pretty much hate me. You know, her folks were kind of rich stuck-ups and never did like me. I guess she finally figured they were right all along. Of course, I've now heard she had a kind of rough stretch with mental issues, but who knows? I can't communicate with any of those people except her brother Charlie, and he's basically out of the day-to-day picture with his own life in Chicago. I hate being so far away from my kids, but maybe some time and space apart is what we all need now. I am just hoping we can really reconnect in a better way when I get them for a month or 6 weeks after school ends this summer. Well, you just need a Cajun woman. Or maybe not for you right now, that's always playing with fire, all that hot-bloodedness. But you definitely need to meet my sister, Gigi. She just divorced her own worthless husband. Good thing, too, before I killed him myself. But she would be fun for you just to be friends with for a bit. I thought, sure, and replied more heartily than I felt. I just couldn't quite imagine a female version of Frenchie, a female Alabama linebacker type. So Monday's the big day for you, huh, man? Sherry? Well, I think it's time for some serious drinking the rest of tonight then. And that's pretty much what we did. It wasn't exactly a fight, but at some point, some loud words were spoken. Eventually, a couple of mobile PD uniforms who knew Frenchie quite well escorted us both out of that bar and took us back to my motel room in the back of their patrol car. We both crashed there, so Monday morning, I already had a kind of reputation going in the squad room, Frenchie's friend who can't hold his liquor. Not exactly what I wanted for a perfect start, but it turned out okay after all. In the first week of April, I received a letter from Susan, a short note saying basically this is my new cell phone number and that I should call her anytime to discuss the kids visiting me this summer, logistics, and timing. So, I called her. Hello, John. She sounded different somehow, maybe just better and not so crazy. Hi, Susan. I got your letter. Let's work this out as nicely as possible, okay? Of course, I want to be as cooperative as possible, but I've made some plans, I was thinking. But hopefully, it will be to your advantage as well. I've already rented a 3-bedroom condo in Gulf Shores for 2 weeks starting June 10th. You might have heard I got some money when Dad died, and I bought a new BMW SUV. I will drive us all down there, so you won't have to go far to pick up the kids for your month, or really however long you want to keep them this summer. In fact, I was thinking if you could and wanted to join us for a week on the beach, you could bunk in with JJ, and it might be a good reacquaintance period for all of us. Please just think about it, you can let me know anytime what you decide. She almost sounded sane again, it was hard to argue with her like this. Well, thanks for the offer. I will think about it. Are the kids there? Can I talk to them a minute? Kimberly's at a friend's studying right now, but everyone else is here. Hold on. I heard her yelling for JJ and Parker and to get Abby. We had a pretty good conversation, they all seemed much more normal, acting and talking with me now. JJ especially was excited about visiting the ocean again. He had been twice before, with Stanford and Edith, and once with Susan. Everyone had even gone on a family vacation to Sandiston while I had stayed home and worked. I didn't begrudge anyone that at the time, I needed to work and didn't want Susan's parents paying my way. But I didn't want the rest of my family to miss an opportunity for a nice week's getaway and to be with their grandparents, who were paying for pretty much everything. Now, I was just happy that a little bit of sanity seemed to be returning to my family life, fingers crossed. I tried talking to my kids at least twice a week now and generally succeeded with everyone but Kimberly. She just wasn't available a lot, and when we did connect, we still really didn't. She remained very cool and remote with me. Well, she was 13 now and entering her teenage years, but the divorce happened at exactly the worst possible time for my little girl, any girl. All of a sudden, her father figure disappeared from her life. I did not have a good feeling about how this might affect her relationship with boys and men as she inevitably got older. I only prayed Susan's mental problems weren't genetic and possibly passed down to Kimberly as well. On top of the divorce, as much as I wanted to live with them all again, at least for a month or 6 weeks this and every other summer, just making that happen this first time was going to be tough. My little 2-bedroom apartment was going to be very crowded, but at least it had 2 baths. I would also have to arrange babysitting, as I could not just take a month off from work. What if I got called out one night for a critical situation? I wasn't going to leave them alone with just a 13-year-old girl. My work wasn't just a job, it was a service, a public service that was always important but sometimes critically important to other innocent people caught up in unexpected threats of violence and death. I loved my children, but I wasn't really able to ever be the greatest dad for them, even when married. Susan necessarily carried that greater parenting load, and I appreciated her and loved her for how well she had done that. As far as I could tell, even in her deteriorated mental state, other than verbally trying to turn my children against me, which logically made some sense given my career calling, she had remained a good mother to the kids. I couldn't be any kind of better father as a single dad either. I couldn't be there for them 24/7 like Susan always could as a stay-at-home married mom. Even now, as a single mom, she was managing well enough financially. There might always be times when others' critical needs for me and my team to risk our own lives would necessarily supersede my own children's needs for my attention and demonstrated love for them. Life wasn't fair, and no one had it all, at least not for very long. Apparently, I might have to make some hard choices myself soon, like maybe swallow my pride and my own fear of more pain Susan might inflict on me for the sake of my kids. I couldn't help but mention these concerns to Frenchie one night while we were drinking a little and relaxing after work. We do what we have to and make it work, eh? But you definitely need to come to my family's little cookout this Saturday. It's at my sister's country house this time. Any time in the afternoon, but the sooner the better. You'll see. He gave me her address and directions since even Google Maps might not be accurate for her County Farm Road location. I guess Frenchie had a pretty large family. I got there a little after 1, and already more than 100 people were there. Sausages, hamburgers, hot dogs, and shrimp were being grilled, large pots of gumbo and crawfish were also boiling. All kinds of side dishes were being set out, and wash tubs full of sodas and beer were filled and iced. There were also 5-gallon containers of lemonade and sweet tea, that southern staple. Long tables were already set up, and kids were running around everywhere, just being happy kids. A Zydeco band was also setting up with an actual pro-quality sound system, which looked like it was mixed for some singers, maybe, and all the acoustic instruments, fiddles, accordion, guitars, bass, and homemade percussion, were being laid out with a portable dance floor being set down. I had a feeling some good times were about to roll. I wasn't the only non-family member there. I recognized several MPD folks and 3 other members of my SWAT team, including Karen Rigby, the only female member currently in tactical operations training. Frenchie spotted me and took me over to meet Jenny, his sister. She seemed to be directing a lot of the activity, evidently, his hostess. "This is my old army buddy and new boss man now, John Thornton," Frenchie said. She smiled at me and said, "Hello, John. Hope you can handle the madness here today. Benny's told me quite a bit about you." She had a twinkle in her eye that matched her dimples. She was easily a head shorter than her brother, maybe only 5 feet 3 inches, and very petite. Nope, she never would have made it as an Alabama linebacker. They both had the same raven hair coloring and naturally darker, always tan skin, and both had very dark brown eyes. But Jenny was a hell of a lot prettier than Benny. Evidently, Frenchie wasn't his nickname here. I was kind of nervous all of a sudden and merely mumbled something like, "Thanks for having me over today." She merely laughed. "Just make sure you get enough to eat, and maybe we can talk a bit more later. Having a real good time is the most important thing." She was back to bossing people around in a real nice way with her wonderful soft voice and accent. "So, what do you think of my sis, Johnny boy?" Frenchie asked. "She seems very nice," I replied. "Nice? Benny's okay here too, but about 50 other males might respond using that nickname." He started laughing. Then a stunningly beautiful and graceful woman walked up and hugged him from behind. I mean NYC or LA model beautiful, very exotic and mysterious looking. I had seen her picture before, but in person, she literally took my breath away. "Ah, M. Sherry," Frenchie said, kissing her. "This is my boss man, John Thornton." "Hello, John. I trust you to keep my Benny safe." "Yes, we keep each other safe," was all I could say in response. I couldn't lie or make promises I might not be able to keep, and that was hard to do. In response to her voice, I surely understood why Frenchie married her. She gave me a little smile and then said, "Please dance with me when the music starts, okay?" Frenchie just said, "All Cajun women just love to dance, and you better know how, Johnny, if you're going to hang around here much at all." Actually, I thought I would be okay. Susan and I had taken ballroom classes for about a year before Kimberly was born. I had always liked music and even dancing in high school and then afterward. Happy enthusiasm and unself-consciousness are most important in a man on the dance floor for most women. In all social dance situations, women just want to be seen and show off themselves basically when dancing. It was a little more complicated than that in partner dances, but hearing the beat and a solid lead counted for a lot. I'd see what they were doing on the dance floor and try to fake the basic steps. Maybe if I drank a few beers first, it was a hell of a good party. The music and dancing really started around 3, after everybody had eaten quite a bit and had a few drinks. The music was really good, and Gigi and her sister Francie sang quite a bit, often with one or more of the band members joining in. Their harmonies were incredible, and they gave me chills. The dancing was non-stop late into the night. Well, the band had to take a few breaks, but the musicians just kept rotating in and out. I danced with Gigi, Francie, Jenny, and a few other women who weren't the least bit shy about grabbing me when they saw I could fake it well enough. It was basically a cowboy 2-step kind of dance, more sideways in place than moving around the dance floor. Frenchie danced quite a bit as well, hell, almost everyone did. The funny thing to me was that for all the drinking and dancing going on, basically no one got out of line or started acting up. There were no jealous flare-ups or too much flirting of any kind, much less pushing any limits. With that many people there had to be a few triangles going on, innocent singles only, or maybe not. It made me think it might have been like a mafia big family get-together, where sudden and violent death might meet anyone breaking some godfather's idea of a pleasant social utopia for one afternoon. Somehow, politeness seemed to just be the rule here. Interesting. Maybe all those alligators in the surrounding swamplands had something to do with it. Later on, with everybody pretty mellow, I talked with Jenny quite a bit. She was just really nice. I also met her 9-year-old son Joey and a nephew and niece. There were almost uncountable cousins, uncles, and aunts. So, you have 4 children? She eventually asked. Yes, they live back in St. Louis. That must be difficult for you. Yes and no. The whole divorce thing was just so sudden and out of the blue for me. It seemed like my wife just suddenly hated me and spent 6 months really badmouthing me to my kids. So, you still loved your wife? Yes, I did. I've been told by her mother and brother that she had a kind of mental breakdown that caused her to do all these things, but what is the truth? At least we can now actually talk to one another somewhat civilly, and my kids seem more normal with me as well. They are all coming down here in June, and I have them full-time for at least a month. So, you have a house here now? No, I probably messed up and just rented a 2-bedroom apartment when everything was still in a state of chaos in my personal life. Let's talk again later before you leave, she said, as someone asked her to dance again. I had to admit my own legs were hurting a bit by now, and I needed some more beer as self-medication. Around 1 a.m., things started winding down, and the band finally had to give it up. Me and about 30 other people were feeling no pain. Frenchie told me to just find a place in the house and stay the night. It was a big house with at least 4 bedrooms. All the women and kids got places upstairs, and the older boys and men found spots downstairs. Lots of air mattresses and old blankets were spread around. Many of the guys just slept outside, having brought their basic camping gear, bags, and thermarests just in case. The next morning was yet another big communal breakfast that started pretty early, as most headed to mass that Sunday morning. I was a tad hungover, but strong coffee, scrambled eggs, and lots of bacon helped quite a bit. These folks knew how to cook for a lot of people at once and could open a restaurant anytime they wanted to. Pretty soon, just about everyone had cleared out except for Frenchie, his wife Jenny, her cousin Carla, and me. Jenny and I finally got to talk a little more. I've been thinking, she started. How would you like to rent half my house when your kids are down here? I have 5 large bedrooms with bunk beds set up in 3 of them, and I just live here now with my son and Carla and her 8-year-old daughter Kay. We could make room for you and your brood, be available for babysitting, and we could always use a few extra bucks, she grinned. I was floored by such generosity. I knew what she was offering me, and I almost couldn't say no. Oh wow, I said, it's almost like a prayer answered, but I just can't say yes right away. At a minimum, let's just try it, and if there are any big personality conflicts right away, I can back out with no hard feelings. Okay, sure John, that's fine. And don't be a stranger around here before then either. Okay, I have a feeling I won't be. Just like that, I had a friend in Mobile who did not wear a uniform of any kind. My job was going pretty well and helped me mentally a lot. Living alone now was just lonely. I missed my wife and my kids always being underfoot. The fact is, I always liked that before without ever thinking about it. Of course, it was never perfect, but the last 6 months of my marriage highlighted just how good the little imperfections had been before. Now living alone was just something to put up with when I wasn't working or occasionally getting together with Jenny and usually Carla and her date, or Frenchie and Gigi, or both couples. I always had a good time doing something with them. Occasionally, we'd catch a movie, especially something like SWAT, and then dissect it and laugh about it afterwards. Many times, it was dancing to live music, but honestly, those bands were seldom nearly as good as the amateurs at the family monthly get-togethers. It always seemed everywhere we went, the musicians knew Gigi, and everyone went nuts until she got up and sang something with them. Occasionally, some drunk just wouldn't leave Gigi alone until Frenchie and I both stood up. I'd usually just pull my badge out, and that would be that. If they and their friends started swinging, anyway, we would put him down, handcuff him, and call MPD to arrest them for drunk and disorderly. This happened very infrequently since Gigi was so popular. I'm thinking we literally saved these kinds of a-holes' lives by not just letting the rest of the crowd handle them. The term gator bait comes to mind. None of our girls would ever dance with anyone else at these public bars unless it happened to be a cousin or a well-known friend, which, come to think of it, we almost always ran into anyway. It turned out I was the only one that really needed to get up to speed on waterborne tactical situations. Everyone else, except Karen, had already attended a TWOO seminar or 2. Tactical Waterborne Operations was a program developed and taught by an ex-SEAL, USN Chief Steve Bronson, and was very effective at covering the basics. The basic was merely staying alive around water. Merely stumbling and falling off a finger dock while approaching a hot boat might be more than embarrassing. It might mean drowning encumbered by 40 pounds of equipment. So, the very first skill that needed to be learned was not panicking in that situation, but effective self-rescue, shedding the proper equipment and deploying the swimmer's vest for safe and quiet flotation. Efficient survival swimming strokes also had to be mastered along with high-speed boat diving, SL insertion techniques, and critical, accurate aimed rifle ability from floating small boats, including our qualified snipers, 1 primary and 1 pretty good backup sniper team in my unit. I also already had one fully qualified UDT guy, with 2 others in the MPD patrol boating unit, one ex-Navy and one with just a commercial background that I could call on if and when needed. The other major technique we needed to practice was boarding moving boats and especially larger ships. Again, the Navy had worked all this out in VBSS doctrine: visit, board, search, and secure, and often used helicopter fast rope boarding techniques. We could possibly do that in an emergency, though that would never be our primary technique. Instead, we worked on fast small boat approaches and using flexible grapple ladders for boarding moving ships. Maybe we should all watch Black Sails. The Coast Guard let us practice on one of their cutters. Occasionally, one of my major job responsibilities was maintaining good contacts and working relationships with the Coast Guard, FBI, and their HRT, and even the USN and possibly SEAL Team CINs. If a large commercial foreign flag freighter seemed hijacked or otherwise just out of control in Mobile Bay, the problem with calling in such high-quality cavalry was the time-critical nature of bad situations. We might just have to do it all on our own at some point, and we could never be prepared enough. Unfortunately, all my officers were basically just cops as well and couldn't just be full-time SWAT people either, waiting to be called on like firemen or even in perpetual training. City police budgets just were always too tight. So another part of my job was scheduling and concern for spatial dispositions when my officers were on loan to narcotics or just out in cars patrolling, with all their personal gear already in the trunks. I tried to keep a couple of rotating guys in the squad room with me, working on paperwork and forming a core of quickest response if and when needed. Otherwise, I strove for under 1 hour full team availability, everyone geared up and on-site anywhere in our metropolitan area, land or water, within an hour after a request was made for us. I also still spent quite a bit of time on physical training. I could now dance pretty comfortably but was still a ways from being able to run a 72-quarter mile or a 7-minute mile, my own goals for minimum acceptable warrior capability for myself and all my team members. I used Karen Rigby shamelessly to motivate all of us. She lacked some of the upper body strength of the guys, but she had played soccer and basketball competitively all through school and could still easily meet those running guidelines. I told her to pour it on during our weekly joint training sessions. Eventually, everyone got there, including me, or at least close enough and dedicated enough to keep at it. Running just isn't easy or fun for some people, but we all have to take the bad with the good to do what we want. So, my life was steadying down pretty well, and I felt Oklahoma about taking a 1-week vacation after only 3 months in my new job to meet my ex-wife and kids in Gulf Shores. I was more nervous driving over than I could ever remember when responding to a hostage situation. Damn it, just be cool and friendly to everyone, I kept telling myself. As soon as I got there, Parker and Abby were all over me, hugging and laughing. Even JJ wanted a hug and was talking fast. Only Kimberly and Susan were a little more reserved, though smiling. Maybe it's going to be okay. We just stayed busy, that seemed to be the key. We spent hours at the beach, with Abby and Parker enjoying playing in the sand while JJ and Kimberly spent more time in the surf. Kimberly was starting to attract some young teen boys' attention and was soon being taught how to surf by a couple of them with their own boards. Did I watch them like a hawk? Hell yes. One of my biggest challenges was that Susan just looked great in her swimsuit. The way she looked and acted all pleasant and supportive of me with the kids, along with the way some of the other older teen girls and young women looked in their more revealing swimsuits, meant I had some restless nights bunking in with JJ. Abby, Parker, and Kimberly shared another bedroom while Susan slept in the master with its king bed, though most nights Abby joined her there sometime before dawn. Let's just say I took a few longer than normal showers. Susan and I didn't have much alone time until late Wednesday night. The kids were all pretty tired out by then from another long day playing in the sun and had retired to their rooms by 10 p.m. Even Kimberly. Susan and I were just relaxing with a little wine and watching something like Must Love Dogs on the TV when we had the talk, or at least the beginning of it. I received notice from the court that my alimony obligations to you have ended, so thanks, I guess. Yes, I don't need the money now, and it was never fair to you anyway. I should never have divorced you. You probably should have divorced me, too, though, the way I acted. There were a few moments of silence. Charlie told me you were sick mentally, but I still can't understand all the things you did, the inconsistencies, and how you acted. Basically, it just seemed you dumped on me while still acting somewhat sane to everyone else. At least everyone seemed to believe you in everything that was important. I'm still sick, John. I'm on an antidepressant that is working pretty well for me right now, but it comes with some side effects. I'm also still seeing a psychiatrist, working through some of my other mental issues. Basically, I've been pretty messed up for a long time, since puberty, for sure. So you didn't fall in love with me and marry me while mentally balanced? Oh, I loved you, and I still do. Marrying on you was the sanest thing I ever did, but therapy has opened a few doors and into some clearer memories. What did you think of me when we first met very first time? She asked me. I experienced a significant change in my life when I was 15 with another boy I hardly cared about at all, just someone I considered safe and even controllable. In fact, that was the only time I was intimate with him, and I hardly remember him. It was just no big deal to me. You were always the big deal. Whenever I saw you walking in the school hallway or at lunchtime, the intensity of both longing and fear never lessened. I cried when you graduated and then went away to join the army, thinking at least high school might be better for me. Instead, I just became wilder, experimenting with alcohol and pills and a few more encounters. Outwardly, I seemed happy enough, but I knew I wasn't. Then college was devastating, and I went overboard. I think I was just self-medicating, and it only made things worse. Getting away from all that was a good thing for me, and the counseling I received helped, but I stopped that too soon. Luckily, my brain chemistry wasn't totally disrupted yet, but it was borderline. Then Charlie told me you were back in town and that he was meeting you, and I finally decided my attraction to you was stronger than my fear of rejection. I kept repeating "grow up, girl" to myself like a mantra. When I saw you again after 4 years, you were more beautiful to me than I even remembered. I just kept hoping and praying you'd call me and want to see me alone and not just as Charlie's sister, and you did. I had 13 wonderful years with you, John, and then I just blew it. I can't even blame it all on depression and my bipolar brain chemistry. The fear of you leaving me and the fear of rejection returned, and I caved into it. I made some terrible decisions, and now I have to live with them, as you do. We all do, and it wasn't your fault, not one little bit. I never deserved you. We often do harm to the things or people we love. We often do bring to life the things we most fear. That's what I did. I just wasn't brave enough. I've never been like this. It was quite a bit to think about. I got us both some more wine. That was Susan's second glass, and I knew that would be her limit. She moderated herself very closely and strongly. Now, Jesus, Susan, I've never thought of you as a coward. You've had 4 kids and raised them primarily by yourself. That all takes courage day by day, and you do have such a strong personality in so many ways. Yes, sometimes I can fake it pretty darn well. I can act confident and assertive once I've made my mind up about something. The decisions I arrive at are based on my innermost fears and insecurities. That's the problem. Just wrong decisions, like seducing poor Jack to get ecstasy from him and then using him for basically empty encounters just for my own self-determined needs. Poor Jack. I drove him crazy too. Screw Jack. You shouldn't feel sorry for that one bit. Even if Jack had the same kind of brain chemistry imbalances as you, he still never should have touched you, even if you presented yourself to him without anything in ready. There is no excuse for his behavior, and you are not to feel at fault. Well, I just hope he gets himself straightened out and leaves you and me alone. That's all I feel for him. Just like those boys in high school and college. I know I can't make you understand all this in so many ways because so much of it is crazy. How can you trust what I'm just telling you? I wish you could talk to my psychiatrist, Rachel. She wanted to meet you whenever we reached this point of discussing it, but you were down here. Are you staying here now? Yes, for the foreseeable future. It's been a really good change for me, a good fit. I just had to get out of St. Louis for both personal and professional reasons. I am sorry I will be so far away from my kids, but I understand I messed up so much in so many ways. I just wish, and she fell silent. What do you wish? That I could turn back time and undo so much. I wish I had asked you for help rather than merely feeling you would just leave me if you really knew how crazy I was, how unhappy I was. I wish I had trusted your basic goodness and your love for me. I saw there were tears in her eyes, but she wasn't losing it. If this was an act, then nothing could ever be real again. Should I let her own fear infect me and influence my own decision-making? Emotion over calculated risk and reason? Well, what's done is done and can't be undone. But maybe we can just live in the now, day by day, one day at a time, and look more forward than backward. Okay, and we both still need to put our kids first as much as possible, right? Yes, and I'll do my best now to never try to use your children against you as pawns in my own stupid, crazy mind games. I think I've got them mostly back on track with reality, except Kimberly, maybe, but she's got the whole teenage angst thing starting now as well. I'm a little scared about that, as that is when I went off the tracks in my own life. But the past few days with us all being together have been just so wonderful for me. I'm sure you can't really imagine. I'm having a really good, relaxing time as well. And don't worry too much about Kimberly. She's not you, and most importantly, you aren't your mother either. I am not your father. I know I haven't been around as much as I wanted to be, even before our divorce, but I hope Kimberly still knows just how much I really love her. I always have and always will. I hope I can spend a little more focused time with Kimberly in the next 6 weeks. There were a few more minutes of thoughtful silence, and then Susan sighed. Could I just sit next to you for a bit while watching TV? Would you put your arm around me like you used to? She said, looking down. I stiffened at this unconsciously, then forced myself to relax and just said, okay. She sat down close to me, laid her head on my shoulder, and I put my arm around her. She felt both like a stranger to me now, but also still just my wife. She smelled the same and felt the same as she had for all the 13 years we had been intimate. Our flesh had been one. She had been and still was mine, body and soul, as I had been hers. But I had never possessed her mind, and she had never possessed mine. In reality, all of us, individuals, our thoughts and mental workings, are ours alone, and the only possible entity that might know otherwise would be God. I still wanted her intimately, that I was sure of and had no control over. Damn it! Why was it all so complicated? After a while, she buried her face in my chest, and I could feel her crying silently. All I could do was stroke her hair and hold her. Eventually, she quieted down and started breathing deeply, and regularly, she fell asleep. My own mental turmoil lessened, and I tried a little zen fade out myself, just being in the now. Before I knew it, I fell asleep too and slept dreamlessly and as restfully as I had in more than a year. The few times of empty encounters I had engaged in over the past year of loneliness, I had never slept with any of those women. It was always lonely encounters, not even hardly worth it. We woke up together the next morning still on the couch. I was now lying on my back, and Susan was half on me, laying across my chest with one leg thrown over mine. We were both dressed in comfortably loose sweats when Abby shook Susan awake, ready for breakfast and a new exciting day at the beach. Susan after wake-up did and gave me a warm smile. If Abby and all the kids weren't there, I probably would have just taken her right then and there. I kissed Susan on the forehead and ruffled Abby's sweet hair as we untangled ourselves, and I headed to the shower. Yep, another longer than normal shower as I tried to work through my feelings and figure out the right thing to do for all of us, one day at a time. From this point forward, things were even better, more relaxed, with even more smiles and laughter. The kids somehow figured out that their mom and dad had spent the night together again, even if it was just on the couch, and that was a good thing, a natural thing. That night, Susan and I found ourselves alone in the living room again as the kids, almost conspiratorially, retired early to bed. We were watching TV, and I was drinking a beer while Susan sipped on a Diet Coke. She sat down on the couch next to me, and I could almost read her mind. Her natural assertiveness was returning, but she still hesitated to sit right against me. I merely lifted my arm and rested it on the back of the couch, and then she scooted right against me. I glanced down at her. She was smiling like the cat that ate the canary, and I almost burst out laughing. I could almost hear the wheels turning in her mind. She wanted to say something, but I decided to wait. Finally, she said, "I'm getting sleepy, honey. Could we finish watching this in the bedroom? Not that I mind sleeping on the couch with you, but there is a king-size bed in there, and you are welcome to share it with me. I saw you rubbing your neck a lot this morning." She was right. I had woken up with a crick in my neck from sleeping on the couch and not moving much last night with Susan snuggled all over me. I still hesitated in answering. "Just sleep, John, if that's all you want," she continued. "The fact is, the meds I'm taking now kind of kill my night drive. I haven't had to buy any new batteries for a long time, if you get my drift." That's too bad, I guess. Is it going to be that way for you from now on?" "God, I hope not. I remember and miss all the hot intim we used to have together," she trailed off, blushing. "But the doctor seems pretty confident that with some trial and error dosage adjustments and further counseling, my natural intimacy will return. It's still more of an art than a science, and night is a lot more complicated for women than men in so many ways. As Rachel puts it, there won't ever be just one pill like Viagra for women. Love itself is still the greatest and longest-lasting aphrodisiac for all of us poor souls. But I did feel those goosebumps and chills, and that total relaxed feeling while lying in your arms last night. I feel bad for you because I know intimate is so important to you, as it is for all men, from my discussions with Rachel. In so many ways, here I am, failing you again as just a woman. Just worry about yourself for now. Your own mental health is so important, for the kids and for me, too. Okay, let's go to your room and you can get some more rest." "I'll be fine." Would I be fine? I didn't know. I still couldn't just trust her, and I also knew that lying next to her in bed would be a kind of torture, maybe sweet, maybe not. Now that I was almost fully recovered from the shooting injuries and pretty much back in shape, my own libido was more than normal. Damn it. We retired to the bedroom, and despite that king-sized bed, she was glued to my side as we watched another innocuous movie. Soon, she was breathing deeply and regularly, and I looked at her face in repose. She was beautiful and seemed more at rest than I had seen her in literally years. Her body was warm and soft against mine. I woke up the next morning with my ex-wife still pressed against me. I looked at her, and she was smiling. I took my shower, and Susan actually joined me in the shower, humming away and helping me wash. Finally, she looked at me and said, "Can I at least get a kiss from you?" What could I do? I kissed her. We rinsed off and got out of the shower. That day at the beach, she wore a new bikini that was cut a little differently. It looked like one or both were just about to fall out. I observed her carefully as all kinds of men, and even teen boys, apparently couldn't keep their eyes off her. On the other hand, she literally only had eyes for me. I wanted to spend more time with my kids, especially Kimberly, but I sure didn't want to leave Susan alone either, with all the other wolves around. Plus, I had to keep an eye on Kimberly, as now she had 4 guys teaching her how to surf. It was one of the best days of my life. Actually, it wasn't just Susan who was attentive and even willingly obedient, it was all the kids, including Kimberly. When I said it was time to head back to the condo to get cleaned up and ready for supper, there were no arguments, not even from Kimberly. She seemed to be doing really well handling her 4 new boyfriends and did not dally at all when her mom called her. I was proud of my oldest daughter's beauty and her poise and self-possession. I also got the impression they were proud of me as their father, and being in a whole family again, could I now deprive them of their feelings by being too self-proud or too scared of possible further pain to myself? This week was rapidly coming to a close, and I didn't want it to. What was next? Okay, go slow, one day at a time. After a nice, quick dinner at one of the favorite seafood places we had found that also served great burgers, fries, and even chicken fingers, we all settled back in at the condo and found a nice family movie we could all enjoy together for a change. Right around 10 p.m., all the kids were practically asleep and headed off to their bedrooms. Abby was asleep, and I carried her to her bed and tucked her in. Susan also kissed her goodnight. Without really discussing it, we both headed to our bedroom. Susan hit the bathroom first. When she came out, she was wearing a nightgown I had never seen before. It was silk or rayon and came down to mid-thigh, but it was also slit to her waist on both sides. It did not appear that she was wearing anything underneath it either. I just looked at her, kind of questioning, and she blushed. I wore that bikini to see how you would react to it. I didn't expect every other man to be so interested, but you watching me kept me kind of hot and bothered. I haven't felt like this in a long time. Maybe we can just fool around a little bit tonight and see how it goes. I'll do anything you want. You did look very cute in that bikini today, and I certainly noticed the other men looking at you. I could hardly look away myself. And this is quite a nightgown you're wearing. You're still a very beautiful woman, Susan. She climbed on the large bed and crawled on her hands and knees toward me. I said, let's not rush into it, please. Give me some time. I did not want to get hurt again, so I just lay there and asked her to lay down beside me. Before I knew it, I was asleep with her near me. It was Saturday, and we were all going to another Cajun family gathering. I had already explained my tentative plans to rent half a house for me and the kids while they were down here. That had turned out to be an interesting conversation. Susan had started by asking, how is it going to work for you with all the kids in your apartment? It's just 2 bedrooms, right? And who is going to look after them while you work? I was a little worried about that, but a friend of mine, the sister of one of my old army buddies who now works for me, has offered to let me rent half her house and even babysit if and when I could. I could read her mind and was waiting for her to make some crack about an old army buddy like Jack, but she had changed, matured, or just smartened up enough not to say that out loud. Instead, she said, how well do you know her? I answered truthfully, pretty well. We've sort of been dating a little, just going out dancing and with mutual friends, that kind of thing. Look, she's part of a big family and a large ethnic community, and they are all really nice people. They have a monthly get-together with food, music, and Zydeco dancing, and one is coming up this Saturday if you'd like to meet her and them. This was a tricky thing for Susan, I imagined. I wasn't going to force her to go. I'd like to take the kids, but even that might be a bit risky. A smaller, more intimate initial meeting with Jenny and Carla and their kids might be the wiser thing. But Susan swallowed a couple of times and said, okay, I think I'd like that. Do you have to go back to work this Monday? I merely nodded. Well, that's too bad. I have reserved this condo for another week just in case, but I can cancel and only need to pay for 2 days. I was actually thinking I'd just stay down here in Mobile all summer anyway. I'll rent a suite at one of those Marriott extended stay places. Wow, this was all kind of news to me. I had no idea this had been her plan all along, or had it. We had actually had this conversation Friday at the beach, before her completed seduction of me last night. And now here we all were in her BMW SUV, driving back to Jenny's place for another all-day party. We got there a little after noon, and the setting up was in full swing. Jenny was in charge again, but she saw us as we all walked up from the car. She gave me one of her patented smiles, kissed me on the cheek, and looked expectantly at my family. I glanced back and saw that both Kimberly and Susan were far from pleased looking, but I merely said, everyone, this is Jenny, and this is the house I have rented space in for us all while you are here with me. Jenny, this is my ex, Susan, and my eldest daughter, Kimberly, JJ, Parker, and Abby. Jenny smiled graciously at everyone and merely said, welcome. Please have a good time here today. My son Joey is around here somewhere. John, I'll get him out here soon. Susan, would you like to help us with the setup a bit? I'll introduce you to my cousin Carla and all the other women as they start showing up. Right about then, Frenchie and Gigi walked up, and I introduced everyone again. JJ and even Kimberly seemed a bit overwhelmed by Gigi's beauty and her voice. Gigi started walking to the kitchen area with Jenny, and Susan and Kimberly surprised me a bit by going with them. I saw all the girls laughing at something before they entered the house, and Kimberly looked back at me with a big grin on her face. I got the idea I was probably the cause of all the merriment, and it didn't bother me a bit. Then I grabbed a beer, but it was mostly just lemonade for me today. About then, Joey came running up and said, "Hi, John. Mom sent me to make friends with your kids." Pretty soon, he and JJ headed off to do the important things boys do. I watched them walk off, and Ben said, "Don't worry, Johnny. We'll all watch the kids here, okay?" Then Carla's daughter, Kay, walked up to meet Parker and Abby, and pretty soon they wandered off as well to meet some more of Kay's cousins. In about an hour, we all got together again and ate the lunch meal. Susan looked really good and comfortable, and everyone seemed to be having a pretty good time. Jenny actually sat next to Susan rather than me. It was like the women were on one side of the long picnic table and us guys were on the other. But Abby insisted on sitting next to me. Music started around 3 p.m., and some of the kids actually started dancing. Then slowly, the dance floor became more grown-up occupied. About 5, we all got together again for a sit-down dinner, which was even shorter for the kids, who were having so much fun that they could hardly sit long enough to eat. Kimberly met some of the younger teen cousins and was just hanging with them. One of the girls taught her the basic dance steps, and she actually danced with a couple of teen boys as well. Gigi grabbed me for a dance after she and Frenchie had sung a set, and when we returned to our table, I noticed Susan looking at me kind of wistfully. I walked up to her, put my hand out, and said, "Come on, honey. We can do this. Just follow me." She actually smiled shyly and got up. She was struggling just a tad. It had been a long time since we had done any partner dancing, and who knew how her meds were affecting her. But I had one trick I remembered from my heavier dancing days. I pulled her into a close body position and told her to follow my body, and that's exactly what she did. Good follows can do that, and it takes the woman right out of all the overthinking part of dancing. Don't worry about the beat or the steps, just follow your partner's body, and that is exactly what she did. It was great. Then we could separate a little, and I could twirl her a bit as well. Soon she was dancing with Ben and then some of the other guys as well. I danced with Jenny, Frenchie, Carla, and even Kimberly once. She seemed to like that, and I was again just so proud of her poise and grace. The plan was to head back after the dinner meal, but I didn't think anyone wanted to leave so early. However, we did have about an hour's drive back, and I started trying to get everyone together around 7 o'clock. We finally loaded up the SUV about 8:30, and in about 15 minutes, 3 of the kids were out. Kimberly was kind of smiling and humming to herself, and Susan looked relaxed and pretty happy. In bed that night, Susan said, "Everyone was just so nice there today." "Yeah, I think they're all just really nice people. Jenny and I talked quite a bit today. I think she really likes you." "Well, I like her too quite a bit, but it's just a friend, right? Right now," Susan kind of whispered. "Then Jenny said that I would be welcome to stay there with my family too, as long as you and the kids are there. How would you feel about that?" To be honest, it scared me a little, just like Susan herself scared me. Well, one thing I thought to myself, life with Susan wasn't ever going to be boring again. I'm not sure it would be okay with me, I guess. How do you feel about it? You know, I'm not really sure either. Now, let me think about it for the next couple of days while I chill on the beach, and I'll let you know what I decide, okay? Sure, honey. I need to get the kids all settled in tomorrow, and we'll just play it by ear. Everything is just up in the air right now. One day at a time. Susan seemed down a little after our talk, and we just cuddled. At that point, everything that had happened today must have been stressful for her. They were strangers to her. They were all nice people, but still strangers to her, while several were very good friends of mine. They must have given her insight into my other life that I was developing separate from her and my kids. Now, let's check from Susan's side. John didn't make love to me last night, and I was discouraged. Jenny was definitely a concern. It wasn't just that she was beautiful, it was that she was just so damn nice and sane. It was the niceness and the saneness I just felt like I couldn't compete with. I wanted John back, but I also loved him enough to just want him happy, and my kids happy. I knew I had to come in last in that whole equation if that was what it took. I really wanted to talk with Rachel, Dr. Horowitz, about the whole situation before I made the decision to move in at Jenny's. This was the main reason I put it off, especially after John made no move to love me last night. Everyone was a little subdued the next morning at breakfast, with the kids realizing I was not joining them that day in their move-in. At the same time, JJ could hardly stop talking about his new friend Joey, and Parker really liked Kaylee, and so did Abby. This was also a scary thing for me. I almost decided to go with them right then anyway, but I tried to handle my fear rationally and not let it panic me. I knew how terribly that could turn out. Rachel and I were definitely focusing on impulse control and delayed gratification, so I held it all together and helped the kids pack everything up and load John's car. Then I hugged them all and gave John the best kiss I could. He told me he would call me tonight and check in with me, and then they were gone. I went into the condo and cried a little bit. I was feeling down, but it felt like a pretty normal down and not any kind of bats hit crazy. The day was sunny and nice, and I decided I would just hit the beach and chill out a little. There weren't many people there today, and I knew even fewer would be out tomorrow and Tuesday. Sunday was an exit travel day for many visitors. His name was Sam O'Donnell. He said he had walked by me a couple of times, and I thought he was checking me out from behind his Oakley sunglasses, but he wasn't obvious. He was wearing a straw cowboy hat and those red trunks that lifeguards or beach vendors wore. He finally walked up to me and started chatting me up. He was just a boy, like mid-20s max, and he looked like a little Brad Pitt, 5 feet 9 inches and about 160 pounds, with cute dimples and eyes and quite the humorous little spiel. I couldn't help but laugh. He was beyond harmless. He finally got around to mentioning he was from an old money Alabama family and that his father was a state senator looking to run for lieutenant governor in the next election cycle. He was totally self-deprecating about it all and said he really didn't like his family and was even a bit tired of all his stuck-up, rich friends. He was just taking a week off at the beach for himself. I swallowed it all. I even met him for dinner that night at that new seafood restaurant we all had liked. It was a pleasant meal, and it was nice not to be eating alone. I had 1 glass of wine and then went right back to the condo and watched a little TV while waiting for John's call. He did call about 9 o'clock and said everything went pretty well. He said he was pretty tired, and handling 4 kids on his own was quite a load, but Kimberly had actually helped quite a bit. JJ had Joey to play with, and Parker had Kaylee, and everything got done. He had just ordered pizza for everyone, which turned out to be a good thing. Jenny and Carlo were pretty tired from yesterday's all day and into the early morning party. It was a nice conversation, and it just ended with stuff like, have a nice day at the beach tomorrow, and have a nice day at work tomorrow. Still, nothing was decided. I did talk to Rachel the next day, but only for about 15 minutes. We went ahead and scheduled an hour for tomorrow at 10 a.m. I knew I would have to do something tomorrow, either make the move into Jenny's or get an extended stay suite and mobile. I went back to the beach about 1 p.m., and soon Sam was next to me chatting again. He was such a funny and relaxing guy. There was just something about him. He had a ton of funny stories about his friends and family. The stories were all kind of bad funny, not really good-natured, but he had such an amusing way of spinning them. I was soon laughing really hard, and that hadn't happened in a long time. We met for dinner again that night at about 7 o'clock and went to a little place he took me to. I let him pick me up at the condo, but it felt like he was just a friend to me. I almost felt like his mother. It was quiet and subdued, and the food was very good. I had 2 glasses of wine at dinner, and then Sam ordered us a dessert to split and a glass of brandy for both of us. I should not have drunk the brandy, but I was so relaxed after the day in the sun, and we had frolicked in the surf a little bit. With that full meal, I went ahead and sipped it. Then Sam showed me the ecstasy and asked if I minded if he took it. Of course not, I reflexively replied. Then he offered me one with that dimpled smile. I was now half drunk anyway from the wine and brandy, and I just smiled in return and swallowed it down without thinking, literally without thinking. What a dumb thing to do, and the shittiness was only beginning. As we were leaving the restaurant, in the car, Sam touched me, and I felt suddenly hot and pretty and just smart again, as I had ever felt before. We were making out when I told him I wanted to go home. He kind of snarled, "Not yet, I need a BJ," and slapped my face enough to stun me a little, then forced my head down in his lap, so I did until he was done. He snarled and started driving me home. He watched from the car as I staggered to the condo, and as soon as I unlocked the door, he was right there. He pushed me inside and then forced himself on me. Yes, I did not protest due to the effects of the pill, but I still didn't like what he was doing and the repercussions that might follow in my shattered life with John. He finally left me crumpled on the floor. I thought about calling the police and just knew that would be like calling John directly and telling him that I had just voluntarily gotten half drunk with a strange man, like on a date, and then voluntarily taken ecstasy and gotten assaulted in every possible way. He wouldn't believe me, the cops wouldn't believe me. I desperately needed some help, and the only one I could turn to was Rachel. After taking a long, hot shower, I took 3 aspirin and climbed into bed, crying. I finally cried myself to sleep and woke up the next morning feeling terrible. I had a headache and other aches, and I felt the ecstasy withdrawals already, like I would never be happy again, as one addict put it. Jesus, I prayed I wouldn't need another rehab stay. I called Rachel on her private emergency number, and she picked right up. "Susan, what's going on?" I started crying and tried to get it all out, finally managing to get most of it across to her. She said, "Oh, honey, I'm sorry that happened to you, but you have got to go to the ER right now and get checked out and taken care of medically. Please just take a taxi. Have the ER doctor call me as soon as that happens, okay?" I'll talk to you after I talk to him, and we'll get you squared away. I don't think you will need rehab, but this has been a setback, and we both know it. It's just what happens sometimes. Have you communicated much with John while you were down there? Well, that started me crying again, but I finally stammered out, yes, things were going pretty well until this, which is what I really wanted to talk to you about before. Okay, Susan, listen, can you give me his cell phone number? I may want to talk to him. Just maybe, I'd like to have it. I gave it to her, and then she told me to call a taxi right now, not to try to drive myself or even just call 911 and get an ambulance, and that's what I did. What do you think of our story today? It seems to me that the husband pressed his wife at the right time and at the right time asked if she was seeing someone. What is your impression of the story? Write in the comments. See you for more videos.